Hello, darlings. Micah Riot here. Last Sunday, I had the incredible honor and luck to interview not only one, but two Caitlins for the podcast. Today, you're going to hear from Caitlin Hackett, who is just out of her apprenticeship. She is at Old Crow in Oakland, and she is in her late 30s, as you'll hear, and a human who's had a beautiful, successful, fruitful career in fine arts. Caitlin's world is absolutely magical. Her art looks like stills from fairy tales. Last year, when we met at Old Crow, she struck me with her sweetness and gentle energy. As the year started, I thought about who I would like to invite onto the podcast, and she came right up. You know how sometimes you'll be talking to a person and you'll have one conversation and you really feel like they opened right up to you, like they have nothing to hide. Like the conversation was so authentic and so sweet. And this is a person who wears their heart on their sleeve and is just a joy to talk to. And I'm sure a joy to get tattooed by. So here is the conversation I had with Caitlin Hackett. Well, hello, Caitlin.
Hi, Micah.
You're my first Caitlin today. I have two of you.
Oh, amazing. Oh, it's a very popular name from the 80s, so there's a whole plethora of us.
I suppose that's true. I think we're all around the same age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 27, and I definitely came up in a huge cohort of Katies, Kates, Catherines, and Caitlins. So,
Yeah. I came from a different country to this country, and my seventh grade class, which was the first American class I was in, was full of actually Jennifers more than
oh,
anybody.
rich in Jennifers.
So give me like a little, just some like identity markers that you like to be for people to know about you.
Oh, sure. Let's see. I'm a Sagittarius.
Okay, that's a good one.
An identical twin. Uh,
Hmm.
I was born and raised, I was born in Texas, but raised in Northern California. So I'm a forest baby, grew up in Humboldt County. I was very deeply influenced by growing up in the trees and in nature up there. Um,
Hmm.
and no doubt influenced by being a twin as well. It probably plays into why I do so many multi-headed animals in my design work. Um, and yeah, I rescue cats. That's sort of my volunteer vocational work that I do on the side. So I'm a big animal lover. And I feel like those are some of my defining features.
How many cats do you have at once in your house now?
Oh gosh, it's definitely cut back since I started tattooing. But in the peak of it, I've fostered for the last 8 years. I think at most I had 14 in my house.
Okay.
And I don't ever want to do that again. That was just sort of a crisis time in the summer. They didn't have enough volunteers. And I wound up having, I think, four separate litters of all different ages of kittens in the house simultaneously on top of my personal cat. So it was a wild time. It was a bad balance. The cats outweighed the humans by far too much.
All the friends of mine who've had kittens, I've been privy to like how wild that is to have kittens. So to have many more than like one or two is sounds like a lot of kittens.
Yeah, I was also primarily a medical and a crisis foster, so it wasn't just like, oh, cute, happy, playful kittens. It was, kittens who had been maimed by humans or wild animals, kittens with terrible diseases or illnesses, kittens with congenital deformities. So it was a really intense situation to be in, especially with like 14, all with different sorts of like care levels. So yeah,
Hmm.
I definitely had pushed myself past my boundaries a little bit with that.
Was this like right before you got into your apprenticeship?
The worst of it was actually probably like pre-pandemic. I've been over the last couple of years really trying to establish some boundaries. So in the last like 4 or 5 years, I'd actually already dramatically cut back. So the summer of 14 kittens was maybe 5 or 6 years ago now. But now that I tattoo, I no longer foster neonatal kittens, and I don't really take on as severe of medical cases because I'm just not home anymore. So don't have the time.
Yeah. So I feel like since we chatted about you coming on the pod and you being on the pod, you like switched your status. You're like no longer an apprentice, right? You're graduated.
Yeah, it's Hannah says different things on different days, but I'd say I've either just graduated or I'm on the cusp of graduating. So um, it's been a year and like 3 weeks now since I started tattooing. And yeah, Hannah says I'm right on the cusp of graduation.
Okay. But you're taking on this next batch of clients like as a full tattoo artist. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say my apprenticeship, well, I don't know a lot about how other people's apprenticeships were, but mine was maybe a little unusual in that I have been essentially acting as a working artist for the last 6 months, while still obviously learning a lot from Hannah and the other artists at the shop. But I think because I was already an established artist going into my apprenticeship, as soon as Hannah felt I was relatively competent, I've already just been fully booking clients in. I have a lower rate than the other artists in the shop since I'm new.
Mhm.
Uh, but I have been in a weird position of like sort of an apprentice and sort of not for a while now.
What made you transition? Like I clearly you've had an art career, you have a huge following. Like what made you want to go from selling art to selling art on skin?
Oh wow. I think like a lot of people in the last couple of years, I've been through a variety of crises, both mentally, physically, financially, relationally. Like most people, COVID really changed my entire world. Having family members get very sick, losing friends to COVID really changed my view on the world. And then with the dawn of NFTs and AI art, I was increasingly being pushed into a corner. I've been a professional artist for the last like 12, 13 years. And through the pandemic and then the sort of this dawn of AI art, I had started to lose a lot of my bigger clients. Individuals were still really great. Individual humans on a base level are so lovely and like still commission paintings, would commission tattoo designs, would buy prints. But as a freelance artist, a lot of my bigger clients, publishing companies, bands, I started to lose them, and some people it was just budget constraints, but I did notice that some people had switched to using AI art. I had a lot of my work scraped into the big like Midjourney databases.
Uh,
Um, and I kind of lost faith. I was actually ready to go back to school. My best friend Karina had just started going back to Laney. They do a free spring semester for low income students. And in 2021, 2022, I had started looking into that to shift my career. It's not that I thought I wouldn't make art anymore. Art is such a deep part of who I am as a person, but I was trying to decide if it was something I still wanted to use as a means of making money and paying rent, because I was really profoundly burnt out and had lost a lot of faith in, I won't say like humanity as a whole. I have a lot of faith in humanity, but after the like AI art stuff, I was like, oh, like people switched so quickly to being willing to not pay an artist, even like companies I'd worked with for a really long time. Um, so I was already in this state of transition in terms of what I considered my career path to be. I think I was in a state of pretty deep mourning as well, not only for everything that was happening in the world, but mourning the way I thought my life would work, the way I thought my art would work. Um, and at that sort of crucial point, I got a new roommate who used to date a tattoo artist for 5 years. And one evening, we were doing what you do, sitting at the kitchen table, complaining about the world and the difficulty of being creative minds in a capitalistic system. And I was talking to her about how I was going to go back to school, but I didn't know what for because I wasn't sure what my other passions would be. And she just sort of laughed at me and was like, you should just go tattoo. You'd probably be good at it.
Mm.
And yeah, that was December of 2022. And I made a post on my Instagram just asking for advice from anyone else who'd made the transition from being a full-time freelance like illustrator to tattooing, just to see what they had to say about it. And that's when Hannah reached out to me and said that her current apprentice was going to be leaving in January and that I could come in and meet with her. So yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Did you get a lot of people answering that ask, like besides Hannah offering the position? But did you get like it's something that I feel like I've seen people go the other way, tattoo to more like visual art or illustration. I
Hmm.
haven't seen a lot of people go, I guess, but not that I know that many people, but it feels like a more unusual path, especially, as an adult, like you're not in your 20s, right? Like you're
Hmm.
lived some life. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a stereotype that tattooing is something that young people do and then they get out of it. For sure for me, it is not the case. Like I'm very much committed to staying and tattooing. But I'm also like now looking to expand some of my like being able to only make money when you work, is hard. Like what if something
Yeah.
happens? What if you can't work as much? What if just the energy starts to wane as you get older?
Oh,
And so now
totally.
I'm like thinking about like, can I make money doing something else? Maybe creating some design that I can print on some clothing, or like I know it's a very over saturated market. But so, what are your thoughts on that?
I did get a lot of advice. A lot of people were so kind and so helpful. A lot of folks let me know, things to look out for in terms of like abusive apprenticeships. A lot of people just gave me advice for like strength training, resting my body. Like you said, I think it is an industry that a lot of people get into younger. I know certainly at my shop, most people started when they were fairly young. Um, I am a little anomalous for having had like a full-fledged art career through my 20s and now in my mid to late 30s having made that transition. I do still like sell prints. I think as you were saying, like having another form of income, especially because our bodies don't last forever. And even in the year I've been tattooing, I've noticed how hard it is on your body to do. And we're only going to get older. Our bodies
Mhm.
don't hold out forever. So I think having those sort of alternate forms of using your creativity to, earn some kind of income is actually really smart.
Mhm.
It's also hard. It's a hard balance. I'm running like my print shop and also like trying to make paintings, but I have stopped doing my gallery work because I just don't have time.
And when you started tattooing, when you finally got to the point where you were like, okay, starting to do work on the skin one on one with people, was it like an immediate match where you're like, this is awesome. I love this. This is what I've been looking for?
I really didn't like it for the first month.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an introvert. And I worked from home alone for 12 years. And it was really challenging the first couple of weeks, even before I was tattooing people, but that first like 4 weeks where I was just tattooing oranges, um, before I started on people, just being in the shop, being in that energy, being around people. There's such a performative aspect of being in the shop that felt very similar to the way that you perform as a gallery artist when you go to a gallery opening, where you are sort of dressing up in the persona that you think you want to be perceived as an artist. And that's not something I had to do working from home or even emailing back and forth with clients like I used to as just a freelance illustrator. Being face to face with people took a really big toll on me. I'm also a perfectionist, so I had such a heavy sense of like duty to do right by the people who came in. And of course, like having been a master of my craft and then becoming an apprentice and being a beginner and a baby and having to relearn and not be very good when I started, was really scary and really daunting. I put a lot of pressure on myself to learn really quickly, which I don't know is like a particularly healthy approach to learning, but it is unfortunately a facet of my personality that's hard to avoid. Um, yeah, it was really hard. I think I was also in mourning still. I was really very sad to leave behind the art career that I had started to build up. It's funny because I think I would be considered an established artist, but you never really feel established in the art world. You always feel as though you're running one step ahead of the crumbling ground and, trying to climb a slippery wall. You never feel like you're at the top, even though ostensibly like I had become established. Yeah, I was in mourning, I'd say those first couple of weeks. It took some time for me to fall in love with tattooing.
And it's not been that long. So when did you start to feel like you were falling in love with it?
Probably around 6 months ago. Um, I had started to sort of fall in like with it in the months before then, especially as I got more used to being in the shop environment and around people. And so many of the artists at the shop were like so helpful and so kind. I think being social, like any muscle, is something you have to build up, especially if it's not something that brings you energy, which in my case, being social costs me a lot of energy. So I had to build up those muscles as well. But I think I kind of hit a breakthrough when I started to be able to actually replicate my art style in tattoos in a way that felt more satisfying. Um, Also, just the relationship with the clients felt really special. I started to realize that people had a lot of like faith and a lot of trust in me, and the kind of people who are drawn to my work are also the kind of people that I am going to be drawn to as individuals. They love animals, they love cats, they love fantasy, they love magic, they love D&D. They're spiritual, they're whimsical, they're powerful, and to be able to make pieces that made them really happy and have so many people come back again and again, those people who came for those early apprentice tattoos, like still came back later for bigger pieces and continue to come back for more in-depth projects. And I think that's when I started to fall in love with it.
What are you using? Like shop talk, like what's your first machine that you felt? So okay, so I'm asking that also because you're used to drawing by hand, I'm assuming, with
Mhm.
pencils and pens on paper. It sounds like
Yeah.
you do really digital stuff. And that is something really different from tattoo tools, but it's less different than it used to be. Like when I was starting out, it was all coil machines, which are much
Mhm.
heavier. And so like going from pencil to coil machine that you had to also like hold a certain way and turn a certain way, like it had to really move a certain way to get nice smooth lines. That was a big like piece of getting used to things.
Mhm.
And now that we have pens, it's something I'm not really familiar with yet. But like my apprentice is definitely that generation of like she's using a pen and I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, so I don't know how to teach you how to like hold the machine or like get the right line quality because I'm not familiar with your tools.
Totally.
She came from a fine art or an art degree background. She's also not willing to go to coils because it's hard on her body. So
Mhm.
I'm just like curious, like what are you using and how does that feel comparatively to like a pen?
Sure. Yeah, I do feel very privileged to have started tattooing at a time when we have machines that are so similar to pens. I worked primarily in watercolor and ballpoint pen, as well as some like micron pen. And when I first started, my mentor, Hannah, had me start with a little Inkjecta, a very tiny little machine, extremely lightweight. Um, and that was so much like a ballpoint pen that I think it made the entire process much easier than I expected. Even the way that you shade and line is so similar to the way that you shade and line with a ballpoint pen. Uh, it was really fascinating how much simpler it was to learn than I thought. I've now moved on to a Cheyenne Hawk Thunder, which is, from what I've been told, a fairly utilitarian machine. It's not exactly a specialist, but it's lightweight. It's not battery operated, it does plug in, so I do have like the cable attached, but it's very lightweight. It has a small grip. It's, again, very similar to holding a ballpoint pen. Um, I've practiced with a few coil machines, but kind of as with your apprentice, I struggle with them because they are very different than inking traditionally or drawing with graphite. You can really feel it like vibrate your whole bones. And
Yeah.
yeah, you feel that work in your wrist. I can see why a lot of tattoo artists get into strength training because those machines are heavy. They put a lot of work on your shoulder and your wrist. Um, so I've only used them once or twice simply because it seemed like I ought to at least try. Um, But yeah, my Cheyenne Hawk Thunder is my workhorse. I use it for almost everything. I also have an FK Iron Spectra. Um, oh gosh, I might be saying that wrong. It's like a shading
I think I know what you're
specialist.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
But your
um,
main pen, you use the same machine for both lining and shading?
pretty much. Yeah, that it's kind of my favorite little machine, so I pretty much use it for everything. I'm hoping to maybe learn more about different machines and test more out as I go, but um,
Is
I've
that
described myself to some of my friends as I'm like a blunt force instrument. Like I learn how to use one thing really well and then I tend to stick with it.
I mean, I totally hear that and I love that too, that idea, but I feel like with tattoo machines, they like they'll blow out, right? And then you have to
hmm
go on and buying I feel like you can even buy the same thing from the same maker and it will still be a little different. So each machine I have to get used to all fresh, it
Yeah,
feels like.
I suspect that's going to be a really interesting part of my journey. I mean, I've only been tattooing for a year, but I know
Mm.
that most of the other artists in my shop have a lot of different machines that they move between for different projects. And even, yeah, as inevitably the machines break down, they'll switch to new ones. And, they end up doing a lot of research on different machines for different purposes.
Mhm.
It's an aspect of the tattoo world that I find really fascinating because it is a little bit like being in a mechanic shop. Like the shop talk is something that still goes a little over my head. I've been trying to learn more as I go. Uh, I will say it is definitely one of the challenges of learning to tattoo is like learning how to use and practice with multiple different machines and knowing that there's an inevitability of the fact that I will have to learn to be adaptive constantly.
Yeah, and it stops to feel as daunting, after a little while, but there's an element of like I've been at it for 15 years, mostly using coil machines, now getting into rotaries and feeling very new again and having to ask for advice because I've worked in a private space for the last like 10 years.
hmm
So, asking one of my friends who works, in a shop, who owns a shop, what are you using and how are you transitioning to rotaries and getting what they said and then being like, I kind of hate this and being like, no, I don't hate this. Okay, now I really like it, and it's like but it's taking a lot of like mental energy to
hmm
shift. But
Yeah,
it's also exciting too. There's
totally.
innovation.
So much of that learning process, yeah, it takes up so much of your mental energy, but it is also exciting. That like
Mhm.
constant transformation is exciting. Feeling like a forever student is, I think, both challenging but also exciting. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, it's like I think if you really truly love your craft, there's never a point when you feel like the master.
hmm
And just because, I finally felt ready to take an apprentice on, it was less about feeling like I knew so much more and more about wanting to take care of somebody else and watch somebody else like get their feet under them, kind of step out of the big world and like usher a younger person. So that was, yeah, it was less like being like, I have all this stuff to offer you and be like, I have something to offer you. And like, I care, I care about you and your career. So
hmm
yeah.
It's
Um,
such a beautiful sense of community. It's something I really have liked about entering the tattoo world is that so much of it is this really remarkable community, like the give and take between artists, the fact that you and your clients are also in collaboration. It's a really beautiful sense of flow back and forth, like the knowledge people share, the knowledge you can return. Even the art of tattooing is so collaborative, the way that it works with the body and has to flow with the body and the inevitability of the decay of our bodies. Um, yeah, I love it. I think it's almost poetic the way that you all have to work together in a shop and as a community and trying to share this knowledge back and forth in this endless cycle because you're never done and there's always something you could learn or change or do better. It's really I want to say like heartwarming. I don't mean to make it sound like a Disney movie, but it is something I've really enjoyed is getting to learn from other people and see how excited they are to also ask me questions, even though I'm like, I don't know anything. Like I just started, but it's interesting. Everyone does have something to offer because you pick up these little tricks and techniques along the way that are so like unique to each person.
it's absolutely best case scenario. It's a absolutely amazing, warm community. And, the other side of it is there's a lot of what people now call gatekeeping. I feel like it's a new term, but that's definitely the case also in like the deep recesses of the tattoo community that is really started with more dudes and
Mhm.
very old school kind of ideas. It definitely, like when I started tattooing, I was told, okay, here's how you pick up more knowledge. You like go to somebody whose work you like, you sit in their chair, you pay them money, and you ask them questions.
Mhm.
You get their work and you can ask them questions. And so I like went to this convention and there was this guy with this like nice work that I liked and was chatting with him and he was like, well, I don't really have time here at the convention, but I'm down in LA, so come down there if you want to get tattooed by me. So I go, make the trip, sit in this chair, get this giant fucking piece that he kind of non-consensually made the size that it was. It's like,
Okay.
okay, fine, I'll get this big piece. So it took us several sessions and I would ask him questions and he would just be like, like just kind of grunting at me while I was like in his chair for hours. So I stopped and I was like, this is disappointing. Told was like the route to making connections and getting more tips and knowledge. And clearly this person is not interested in sharing with me. Um, so I was like, okay, this is not the way. And honestly, like I've kind of just learned on my own, like learned most of
Mhm.
what I know just by practicing it. And like my style is very much my own in many ways that I've never worked with somebody who does what I do.
Yeah.
And then, having someone like Hannah, having Wolf, like having people who I know who I just feel peers with. And also,
Mhm.
like when I come to get tattooed by Hannah, she's happy to answer my questions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I definitely feel very fortunate to be at a shop where people have been very open about their skills and willing to share because I've certainly heard some horror stories similar to the one you told of a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of unwillingness to share. And it's like that even in the fine art community in some places. So it's unfortunately something I think that goes across a lot of different creative fields. I definitely feel as though I really lucked out ending up in the shop that I did and getting to have the sort of experience that I had with learning from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That it's also been like somewhat hands off in a way that I also think is probably helpful. Like you said, a lot of it is just like developing your own style and like teaching yourself. But I think it's hard when you feel like that's your only option. Yeah, if people aren't like actually willing to sort of open up those gates and like share that information. It's an interesting facet of being a creative person too, because I've always really loved to tell people like how I work. Obviously as a fine artist, like we had a big community and we would all, share information and tips and techniques and brands of paints and paper and do tutorials and send them to each other. Um,
That's really sweet.
yeah, but obviously that was not the case universally across, that creative community. There were definitely people who would harbor, their secrets as closely as they could and would be insulted if they perceived that you were trying to like steal their painting technique or, whatever it is that they considered you to be doing as if everyone wasn't already going to do the work differently, as if every creative body wasn't going to take that technique and do something completely different with it. Um, but I think that fear mindset, that scarcity mindset, is also deeply ingrained into a lot of creative people just because it can be such a hard industry to make a living in. Um, Obviously, like trying to be a creative person under capitalism, that scarcity mindset can really corrupt you. And it's not as if it's not entirely true. Like we we do live on sort of the financial edge a lot of the time, and I think that fear tends to bleed into people in the way that they want to share.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of that scarcity mindset, but there's also this new element, I feel like, of social media and people wanting to go viral, right? So if you
Mhm.
share a little piece of knowledge that people want to know, they'll keep watching your video, it'll get pushed to other people, and you'll go viral, and then that'll potentially bring you more followers, more money, some brand deal, whatever. So I feel like there's like that mindset of scarcity is now being capitalized on, right? Like people now will capitalize on sharing. Like I feel like there's like the Pat McGrath look, there was like that. I don't know if you've seen that online, but I think what they did is like put the like this kind of coat on people's faces, and they were shiny, and people were like, how did you do that makeup look? And Pat McGrath was like, I won't tell you. And people were like, how could you not tell us? This is wrong that you won't tell us. Like, don't gatekeep. And there was always a conversation about artists and what they have a right, to share, not share. And then
Mhm.
I think Pat McGrath did like an event where the makeup artists like showed how to do the look, which I think was pretty straightforward. But it became this huge viral thing, and I was like, this is just really interesting. Like, we are in an age of information access for which we have to pay with our attention, eyeballs, likes, like, or money.
Totally.
But it's
Yeah.
just such a shift how
Yeah.
we
Social
capitalize
media
on literally
is
everything.
it's a wild game. And
Yeah.
people it has become very gamified, um, trying to figure out what the right recipe is to have a viral moment. It's kind of wild to have to turn yourself into a content creator and to turn your art into content and to try and figure out what's going to be popular. Um, God, it's wild. It's exhausting.
Can you speak to that? I'm curious. I mean, you have a really big following, 250 or so thousand people. Um,
Yeah,
for
I
tattoo artists. That's so much for a tattoo artist and for a visual artist.
yeah,
And, it
I
doesn't really matter. Like, it's not, what
mhm.
makes somebody good clearly, but I feel like it does have an effect on your career and like where
Oh,
you're going
totally.
from here.
Yeah, I got very lucky in a lot of ways. I started on Instagram right at the beginning, like very early on, before Facebook bought it, before the algorithm changed, back when whoever followed you saw what you posted in chronological order. Um, and I got my start back then. Like, I built up a huge following very early on, back when I think it was still possible to do so. I actually don't think it is possible to do so in the same way any longer. I know some people still manage it, but um, I used to get 1,000 new followers a week. It was wild. It was wild times. I was featured in a few art magazines back when I was in my 20s and lived in New York City, and a few like major galleries that I used to show with also shared my work, and it just exploded my social media following. Um, and back then, if you could get over 1,000, all of a sudden you would just be getting fed more followers. And I think once I passed like 40,000, it just fed itself. I will say, like, I'm good about social media. I have a pretty strict rule for how frequently I post. I post every single day on all of my platforms. Um, Sometimes more frequently, depending on the platform. These days, slightly less because none of it really works anymore.
Mhm.
But
It like
yeah.
doesn't work in the positive way, but it works in a negative way. Like, if you skip a week, it will just completely tank.
Oh yeah.
Post
It's
every day, it will stay the same. I'm just like,
mhm.
fucking,
It's exhausting. It
yeah.
does not feel very rewarding anymore. So yeah, I think on my Insta I had gotten up at one point to 430,000 followers. I'm down now to 425,000 because you never gain anymore. It's pretty much a losing game. Um, well, some people probably do. It probably depends what you're doing, but um,
I was off by like hundreds of thousands. Sorry. Like,
it's all,
just
it,
maybe.
it really does not matter. Yeah, I mean it does. I'm grateful. It's a privilege to have had that following, to have been able to gather it the way that I did. Prior to Facebook having bought Instagram, everything really changed after that. And now I feel like I don't know how it works, and I try to really pay attention to the system and what they want you to do. Reels were hot for a second. Now they want you to look at posts for a certain length of time. So doing the kind of posts where people have to like scroll through, but it's addicting in a really bad way. I think I would consider myself to be fairly social media addicted. I don't find it to be a huge positive in my life, even though it is what launched my career. Like, Instagram launched my fine art career. Um, I was just a young artist, recently graduated in New York City in the middle of that big recession. And my now ex husband convinced me to join Instagram. and it changed everything. It's what allowed me to quit waitressing. It's what got me gallery shows. So I'm extremely grateful for it. Um, I will say I've really had to adjust my expectations now that it doesn't work the same way, because I had gotten kind of hooked on that dopamine hit of being able to post something and get like this huge reaction. But even now, even in these sort of waning days of it, it is still extremely useful. It's how I get most of my clients. It's why I still post to it almost every day, because I still end up getting a lot of my clients through Instagram, through TikTok, through Twitter or X. I'm on every app under the sun.
Are you on Reddit also?
That's the only one I'm not on. I never got into Reddit. Although we have been told that we should at the shop in our recent staff meetings. They were talking about that as a good option for getting your tattoos out there. So,
There's some pretty busy tattoo subreddits, so yeah, it
mhm,
can be a good thing. But so I'm curious with the social media piece. Like when I got on TikTok last year, I had one piece go viral, like got like 6.6 million views.
mhm.
But
Wow.
in that onslaught of the views, of course, there were all these really shitty comments,
Oh, yeah.
from people who kind of forget that there's a person behind the thing and like accusing me of lying and all this stuff, which, I'm
Mhm.
just like, why would I do, like, I get why you think that people lie on the internet, but I don't. Like,
Yeah.
there's no need for me to do that. And like, did you see my account? I have like 5 postings and this happens to go
Yeah.
viral.
It's like,
So
what scheme do you think I have here? Like,
seriously, but it really stressed me out. I was like, I don't know if I cried, I might have, but I like
mhm,
really got stressed out about it. And it was so early in my TikTok posting that I didn't realize that you were supposed to respond and like keep it going,
mhm.
keep making response videos and like
Yeah.
defend yourself online. And I just kind of would sometimes like yell at the people, sometimes delete their comments, sometimes like retort, but I just didn't really know how to deal. So when you have a really big amount of people following you, they forget that there's a you, like a single
Mhm.
human. So how do you deal with do you still get a lot, like do you get negative attention too? Do people say anything shitty?
Oh, yeah, all the
Yeah.
time.
Okay. So how do you
It's
deal?
the
As like an introvert and clearly sensitive human.
Oh gosh, yeah. When you were talking about that, like it just made my hackles rise. Yeah, I have cried so many times over comments. I am a crier by nature, and I have for sure cried at a lot of comments that people have left. I used to get really angry and engage a lot. Um, I think I learned over time, I know that the thing that they want is my attention. And I know even that the thing the algorithm wants is like me to give them attention. Like you were saying, this like create a drama, create a back and forth. I just don't anymore. I delete everything. I delete every negative comment. Like I am absolutely unwilling to feed any energy into it. There's no avoiding negative comments. People are always going to say shitty things, especially on the internet when you have that level of anonymity, and especially when you get a post that goes viral. Like the amount of cruel and sort of inane things that people will say to you is really shocking sometimes. um, and they always seem to stick in your head more than the like millions of nice and friendly comments. Yeah, I delete everything now. I delete it right away. But I can remember them, like they stick in my head. I feel like I carry them with me, and I try not to. I try to just let it go. I know that somewhere out there, there's just another bored, sad individual who saw that and was struck by some sense of envy or longing or pain. Who knows? Or just the petty, petulant, malice of a stranger. Uh, but yeah, I delete everything now. It's not that it doesn't impact me. I'd like to say I'm, as calm as a wind, just letting it blow past me, but I'm not. I go and I cry and I think about it and I text my friend and send them a screenshot and say, "How could someone say this to me?" But I delete all of them. I don't engage. Yeah, I feel like it's the only way to regain any sense of like power in the dynamic is to remember that like it's my page, it's my feed. I don't mind constructive comments or questions, even if they are borderline, maybe negative or critical, as long as I feel as though they weren't said with malice. But anything that feels like pure malice, I do not engage with or keep. I just get rid of all of it because I just have to accept that there's always going to be malice and it hurts me and I don't want to see it. And I don't want my other followers to get in arguments with these people and have potentially their days ruined by being dragged into something. So, but yeah, it is wild. It's wild the amount of energy people will extend into just saying something mean for the sake of cruelty.
Hmm. Someone I know who is a creator and has a big following and has a topic that's controversial for
Mm-hmm.
their videos has their one of their partners go through all of the comments and delete all the negative ones. I feel like that's a really good idea if you want to like keep peace and you have a big following.
Totally. Yeah. Just to preserve your own mental well-being. Because yeah, it really does stick with you.
Yeah, like
It's
when you said that you carry it with you, I was just like, oh no, like that's so I don't want you to have to keep that shit inside your body. Like that's not
I
good.
know. Yeah. It's I think like I have a like a deep and inherent sense of insecurity about my own work. It is part of what makes me strive to do better, but it also makes me particularly vulnerable to, you know, malicious comments because there's always a part of me that's like, should I examine that? Should I carry that with me? Let me take the microscope up to it and see if maybe they've seen through me to some inherent flaw. Um, and I've had to really train myself to just be like, just delete it, don't look at it, don't think about it. But having someone else go through, I think, is also a useful measure. I used to have my ex-husband do that for my emails for me. And there's
Mhm.
a reason I don't use any of my DMs. So,
Mhm. Right, that
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. Um, is your sibling your twin? Is
Hmm.
she, I assume she, maybe they use different pronouns,
Oh, yeah. And my sister is she, her, and my brother is they, them. So,
but you're, so you have a twin and then your brother is older or younger?
younger, we have a younger brother named True. And they
Okay.
are an angel and the best thing in the world. And then my sister and I, we are 5 minutes apart. So
Oh my God.
I'm 5 minutes older, 5 minutes of only childdom.
I'm sure that you hold that over her. Is
Yes,
she
5 minutes of wisdom.
a similar type of person? Is she like artistic and sensitive and introverted?
Yeah, but in very, very different ways than me, I'd say. Although increasingly, I think I've realized like we really are the same. It just manifests a little differently with her. She's very creative as children. We spent all of our time drawing together. And I would say when we were young, like she was a better artist than I was, but we drew constantly. Our parents could just sit us down with a pile of paper and we would draw and tell stories together and pass the drawings back and forth and collaborate on them and finish each other's drawings. And um, yeah, she was really good. She went a slightly different route. She wound up becoming a graphic designer. So when I went to college for fine art, she went to college for graphic design, and now she's a product designer.
Hmm. Where is she living?
Oh, we're all in Oakland. So she's
Okay,
in East Oakland. My little brother is in West Oakland.
sweet. Love
Yeah.
that.
We've all gathered.
Do you
It's
do other art related crafts or hobbies that are not like 2D? I mean, tattooing is kind of 3D, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like another type of artistic endeavor.
Oh, I used to do more. These days, I don't as much. I used to really like sculpting little objects with like Sculpey and clay. It's actually something my sister and I did growing up. We would sculpt miniatures. We were obsessed with miniatures. We had a huge doll house where no dolls lived, only tiny glass animals dwelled there. And we would sculpt tiny slices of pies and little tiny cast iron pans with little tiny eggs and tiny chairs. So I love sculpting, but I've definitely kind of fallen out of that. I love storytelling. I think a lot of my work has a narrative nature because of that, and I'm a D&D player and a DM, and I love building worlds and designing monsters and creating gods and vast stories. I love collaborative storytelling in particular. I've never been a very competitive person, so actually growing up, I hated board games. But now, as an adult, I really love that there's a lot of collaborative games, and obviously, any kind of collaborative storytelling really appeals to me. So I think I get a lot of creative. Probably my the real creative outlet now is storytelling and D&D and running games. I think that's the place where I get the kind of creative bliss that I used to get as a kid from drawing and painting. But now that drawing and painting has become the labor that I do, I don't get the same euphoric kind of joy from it. Whereas with the storytelling work that I do, it makes me feel so connected to the world. It makes me so excited. I will stay up all night. I'll get an idea and just be writing notes on it. And I can't wait to like build a world that my friends get to engage with and create stories that make them feel special and powerful and connected. So it makes me so happy.
It's amazing. What if you had a few more lifetimes to fill with jobs? What else would you do? What would be like your other like 2 or 3 lifetimes of types of work that you would do?
That is such a good question. Ugh, I love that question. Oh, if I had enough lifetimes to fill, I think I would spend one probably as a biologist. That was the other route in life I considered taking. I love wildlife biology. I love microbiology. I would have loved it. I sort of see it as like the branch in my path. You know, I chose to go to art school, but I also, when I was touring colleges, was debating studying biology. And I wound up choosing to go to Pratt in New York to study art. And I declined my acceptance to UC Santa Cruz, where I would have probably studied the sciences. And I always think of that as the path not taken. And I like to think of some fragmented mirror universe where I took the other path, and there's some other Caitlin Hackett who became a scientist. I could for sure see a lifetime spent doing that. If given more lifetimes, I think I would love to travel the world and be like a chef and make food because I love cooking. I love creating food. I love making food for other people. It's definitely one of the things that satisfies me the most is feeding people and probably writing. I know I could still do that. I sometimes have to remind myself that life is not over, that you could always start over. You could always begin another lifetime within your own lifetime. And in some ways, I guess I did that by switching careers at, 35, 36.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think I have to constantly remind myself that it is, in fact, not too late. If I wanted to entirely change my entire life again, I could simply pick up something new and start over.
It's like mostly true, it's like living in late stage capitalism, as you said. Like there's no, I mean, it depends on your setup and your family, but like if you don't have a safety net, like you have to
Mhm.
keep kind of like hustling to make that money to pay that rent. But yeah, and I think as an idea, it's definitely true that one could switch careers like midlife, no problem.
Yeah, logistically speaking, financially, there's definitely
Yeah.
the struggle of making that jump. But um, I think having already kind of done it once, it makes me feel as though it would be more possible with everything that happened in like the last 3 years. It's like, okay, yeah, I did like hit rock bottom at dead broke. And of course, tattooing is very in line with what I'm already doing. Um, it's not that big of a jump, but I was very close to going back to college for the sciences. So I sometimes think about that as well. If I had taken that route again, like again, I picked art. Again, when I had the choice, I chose art. But I do sometimes think about the fact that even though everything bottomed out, I have somehow crawled my way back up again.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Well, since you told me you like to cook, what's like a common dinner that you've been making yourself, like in the last little while that you were like, this is my go-to dinner that I'm making?
I've been on a big cauliflower kick. So I've been doing curried cauliflower and chickpeas. I'm primarily vegetarian, so I cook mostly vegetarian. So
Mm.
for the last week, I had bought like a couple big heads of cauliflower. They're like cheap and they last a long time. And I've just been doing like curried cauliflower with chickpeas. Last night, I made orzo in vegetable broth and then added in the cauliflower and the chickpeas and tomatoes. Oh, it was so good. I have been on that kick for a whole week. But before that, I was on a big risotto. It's winter, it's risotto season. So I was on like a mushroom risotto kick for a little while. Um, and then my whole family makes fun of me because I eat the same thing for breakfast every day and have for probably 8 years. But I have a one of those Trader Joe's cowboy quinoa veggie burgers on a bed of spinach with a fried egg, and then whatever vegetable I have, like usually bell peppers sauteed on the side. And I pretty much have that for breakfast every single day.
Oh my God, I love to hear that. I love to hear that because I'm a big proponent of a savory breakfast, and
Hmm.
people are like, "Oh, I have a bowl of cereal," right? Like they're used to this thing, and I'm like, "You're eating sugar for breakfast. That's like so bad for your blood sugar, and like just you're not setting yourself up for a day of energy." And they're like, "Well, it's not sweet cereal. It's like the." I'm like, "No, it's still."
Yeah.
You need a savory breakfast with protein and stuff. So I'm happy to hear that you do that. That's a really interesting breakfast. Like, what if you don't have a Trader Joe's around where you are? Or like, what if you don't get yourself to it? Then what do you have for the patty?
Um, I'll usually find alternative patties if I have to go somewhere else, usually like a black bean patty, any kind of sort of like I like the ones that are higher in protein, so I don't usually get the sort of like potato ones, but I really like a black bean patty. And any will do. I really like the Trader Joe's cowboy quinoa ones because they get really crispy on the outside when you pan fry them. Um, but any will do, and I definitely do branch out to others. And every once in a while, I'll have like a fully different breakfast. But like you said, it's almost always savory. I'm hypoglycemic, so if I don't eat protein in the morning, I'm pretty much useless by afternoon. So
Mhm. Do
I
you know how many grams of protein that thing has?
ooh, I'd have to check. I wonder. I think it's like 15 grams of protein.
That's really
I'll have
good.
to look though. But yeah, it's pretty high, which is part of why I like it. I've been thinking about cutting eggs out of my diet and going vegan, but it would be hard for me because I do eat a lot of eggs. So, and I am a creature of habit. I love that breakfast so much. So,
So, okay, I'm gonna pivot us because we don't have too much more time, but I'm really curious about how you're managing making all the art that you make and all the different drafts, I'm sure, and getting line work out of your
mhm.
drawings without an iPad. So this is a new thing for me. I started using my iPad about a year ago, and I like now can't imagine not using it. So how do you do it without an iPad?
Yeah, because I worked traditionally prior to getting into tattooing, I have still been drawing all my designs traditionally, and I'll then scan them in and then work on them in Photoshop. And I do have a Wacom tablet or Wacom, I'm not totally sure how you pronounce it, that my ex-husband left me. He was a photographer, and I used to use it to help him retouch his photos from photo shoots. And so I did know how to use like Photoshop for digital editing, and I knew how to use the tablet to like alter photographs. So I've been using Photoshop and that tablet, and I'll take either the inked drawings that I've completed and I'll scan them in and sort of alter them digitally that way. Or I'll take like a graphite sketch that I've drawn on paper and scan it in and then essentially ink it digitally in a way that I can then like play around with a little bit more. Because obviously, with the digital tools, you can really make sure that the piece is going to fit whatever body part that you're working on. And I have been considering getting an actual iPad to work on because obviously with the Wacom, when I plug it into my laptop, there is a little bit of that delay. It's not like you're not drawing directly onto the screen like you would with a lot of the tablets. So it can make it a little frustrating sometimes when I'm trying to like ink in a piece or alter a piece.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Okay.
for now, I'm still kind of doing it old school. I'm still just scanning in my sketches and doing my best. I have had both Hannah and one of my friends who used to work the shop Makoto have both offered to give me tablets that they're no longer using. I think because they see me struggling and are like, "Oh, you could make your life a lot easier." So I might take them up on it one of these days. I think I still have a perverse sense of pride in the fact that I draw traditionally. I love paper so much. I love the feeling of paper. I love the feeling of the texture, the like scrape of the pen over the texture of the paper. Maybe that's why the movement of the needle through skin is so satisfying. I think there's an echo there. So,
Yeah,
anyways.
for sure. No, I hear you, and I prefer to draw something on paper, but then I'll take a picture of it with my iPad and then
Mhm.
just, like do the line work on it.
Yeah, I love that methodology. I think that's probably what I'll end up doing as well. There's just something about sketching on paper like that, like you were saying. I
That's
love it.
great. It's very true. And I had to get one of those like I thought I was like Oh, the iPad, like years ago when I first bought my iPad, I was like, it needs something like a screen protector that it feels like paper. And at
Mhm.
the time there wasn't anything like that. I was like, business idea. Of course, didn't do anything with that because I'm not interested in like hiring some factory in China to make things like that and keeping track of all that. But now there's so many options. So yeah, that I got one. It's not probably the best one, but it does help with that like, little scrapey, more
Yeah, a bit of that paper sense.
mhm.
It like anchors you when you're sketching, I think.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah,
But
it's very
yeah,
calming.
it's cool to talk to someone else who does that. Almost everyone else at the shop just sketches straight into their tablets, and they do incredible work. So it's obviously really working for them. And I can definitely see the benefits of working on a tablet where you can draw right on the screen and not having to do sort of this like transfer with the Wacom and everything. So
Mhm.
that'll probably
Yeah.
be one of my investments coming up. That, and I'm hoping to maybe try out a couple of different machines that Makoto recommended. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I'm gonna go back to the beginning of our session when I'm editing this. I'm
Mhm.
gonna take down notes about the machines you mentioned because I want to also give those tips to my apprentice and also for myself. Like I'm ready to
Yeah,
get into
yeah.
process.
We Makoto, who used to work at Old Crow with me, and then Sarah, who I think on Insta goes as La French Sarah. She moved back to France, so neither of them are at the shop anymore. But both of them had used the Cheyenne Hawk Thunder, and they both do work that really resonated with me. Sarah did a lot of like illustrative birds and plants, and then Makoto does kind of everything. She's very
Yeah.
multi-talented, but obviously a lot of really beautiful line work, and both of them were like, oh, you'd probably like this even though it's not a specialist. And they were right, I have really liked it, so your apprentice might dig it too.
Mhm.
And it is lightweight, which I have appreciated with my little bird wrists since I have not really gotten myself into strength training yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just better, it's like there's no need to overstress your body and
Mhm.
there's like make your way as easy as possible.
Yeah. Isn't it so fascinating? Like, as a tattoo artist, you're faced with mortality in so many different ways. Like, not only do you feel the strain in your body constantly, like in your back and your shoulders and your eyes, and your wrists and your fingers, like, but also the fact that we're working, art making is like a form of immortality, but when you're working in tattoos, it's actually such a mortal form of art because the tattoo will die when the body dies. Um, and it's an interesting way of creating art, having gone from a world where I'm making paintings that I hope will last for hundreds of years after I'm dead, to now being honestly obsessed with this idea of making work that is mortal, and then also feeling so deeply the mortality of my body and the pressure of my body, and thinking all the time, how many years do I have in me to do this physically? Whereas I always thought like I can paint in watercolors probably up until the day I die. Even if I'm bedridden, even if I lose use of my hands, like I could use my mouth to hold a brush. I could paint until the last breath.
Mm.
But tattooing feels as though it has a time limit. Like the pressure of the body makes it feel as though there's a time limit. And I'm sure you have a very different perspective on that because you've been doing it for so much longer than me. But just as someone who's doing this in my late 30s and like really feeling the physicality of it, and being someone who thinks a lot about mortality and death and aging, um, it's fascinating. I'd be curious actually to know like your thoughts on that as someone who's been tattooing and working with bodies and working within your body.
Um, yeah, I have a totally different perspective on it because I never was a painter. That wasn't
Mhm.
anything that ever appealed to me. In fact, when I was starting to tattoo, I was like, how can I be a good tattoo artist if I'm not a painter? Because that
Mhm.
seems to be the first thing people do. And they go from painting to tattooing as a practice, right? They paint as kids, as teenagers. They maybe get an art school education and they tattoo. And my mentor at the time, one of them, the owner of Black and Blue, her work is much more abstract and she loves Idexa. I don't know if you know Idexa's work.
Oh, I think I've seen them.
Yeah, and it's pretty abstract, and the art she would make also with her hands was more abstract and like big pieces of wood like put together and like metal bits. And I was like, okay, there's a space in the tattoo world for people who are not illustrative um, artists. And of course, when I started, I did everything, but it was right away that sense of like I'm making this piece of art for you on you, and you're taking it away with you. And talking to other people at the shop, I remember people being like, God, I wish I could keep my art. Like, I don't want to give my art away. Like, I love
Mhm.
my art. I want to keep it. And I'm like, I don't want to keep it. I don't want anything to do with it after it's done. Like, I'm happy that I make it and someone else is happy and they take it and they leave. Because for me, that like one-to-one relationship and that like ephemeral nature of it is
Mhm.
why I love it. It is like it changes, it ages, it fades, it spreads, and I love all of that about it.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. I think that's maybe something that draws me into tattooing more and more. I love that. The idea of the ephemerality of it as an art form, and the idea that the whole process of it is, yeah, like you said, letting go. Like you're letting it go and you're taking joy in letting it go and knowing that the art you are creating is more so than almost any other art form, a collaboration with your client and a collaboration with the universe that you no longer have control of once it walks away. And time and sun and age will do what it wants to the thing that you spent, hours diligently crafting. But I kind of
Mhm.
love that. Yeah, it's the mortality of it, I think, is really beautiful. I love the way that you talked about that. Yeah, it is ephemeral. And that's, I think, part of what makes it more special.
Thank you. And I also like I made this little episode this week about the journey versus destination of going on the tattoo journey to get the
Mhm.
tattoo. I don't know if it made a lot of sense to other people because it was late when I was making it. I was like, am I just rambling? Like, is anyone going to understand what I'm saying? But for me, like, like my best friend was somebody I tattooed early on. My partner was somebody I tattooed, and then we got together shortly after that. Somebody I tattoo now just texted me the other day and they were like, thank you so much. I am loving the connection I'm making with the therapist you recommended, and so, there's a couple of folks who are now married, like kind of long-term happily married because I introduced them. So the the journey of like your connection with your tattoo artist is so much more than just like how to get to the final product of having the tattoo.
Mhm.
And that's like the weaving of the community, the weaving of the connections is like so much a part of it for me that's like, yeah, it's like 50%, 75% of the point of, this thing we do together, which is to then create the final product on your body. Like, I hope that this process changes you, not just that the tattoo itself will be like an addition to your life.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. It is very collaborative, it is very community oriented, and it is a way of adorning people's bodies that does more than just like create a static piece of art. Like you are building a community with every person that you meet. Um, it is amazing to think of people coming back throughout the years and these dynamics that you get to build with them over time. Even just in the 1 year I've been working, I already have had a few clients who've been in 3, 4, or 5 times, and I like have gotten to watch like one of them go through a fertility process over the course of the year and like just had to cancel her big tattoo project because she just found out she's pregnant and like yeah, how amazing, how deeply human. Um,
Hmm.
I loved being a traditional artist and I still love making traditional art, even though I think some of my relationship to that was spoiled by the really intense pressure that I was put under in order to like support myself and support my husband for so many years. It's kind of nice to enter this new industry with this new energy at a time in my life when I'm really particularly interested in friendship, in community, in collaboration, and to find, fortunately enough, that there is, in fact, a community waiting there and a lot of connections to be made that, yeah, go beyond just, yeah, the art on the body and the ink in the skin, whatever sort of witchcraft we're doing with blood and ink and needles is also this beautiful moment of like connecting with other people in a way that, as someone who is pretty introverted and who spent a lot of years both working alone from home and also dealing with a lot of like issues in my relationship and life as sort of this like white knight, like solo figure. it's such a relief to sort of like lift that mantle and enter a space where not only am I the novice who gets to learn, who gets to ask questions, who does not have to be perfect, but yeah, also there's people. You open the door and there's people on the other side.
Yes, exactly. And they will be there. That's the thing, it's like you make these connections and that's it's for life, even if you're not like in touch with them every month,
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, this is I feel like this is such a beautiful development for you. Like this really feels like a fresh start for you in like precisely the ways you've needed it. And I'm happy to hear about that.
Yeah, it really has been. I'm infinitely grateful.
Mhm.
I'll always be grateful to Hannah for having sent me that DM and kind of opened that doorway, even if I, didn't love it at first. It's been such a path of falling in love. And like you said, so much about falling in love with the people that I work with and the people who I've created art for. So yeah, I'm so grateful.
Hannah is a very smart person and knows gold when she sees it. That is for sure true.
Yeah, she's great. She's so funny.
Yeah,
I love her. She's so sharp in a way
she's
that I'm like not sharp, and I love that sharpness.
very, yes, very different also from my set of skills.
Hmm.
So I ask everybody this question. I try to remember to. What's a small thing that's been making you happy lately?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's been a whole bunch of things lately, but I think in
Keep it
particular,
small,
yeah,
small.
like probably like the littlest thing that's happening this week, and it's very mundane, but I'm finally replacing the curtains in here that my cat has absolutely shredded, and they just actually arrived yesterday morning, but I was at work all day yesterday, but today I'm home, and after this I'm going to hang them. I'm going to move the curtain rods. These curtain rods were here when I moved into the apartment, and so they're at top of window level. And I want to take them up. We have high ceilings. I want to take them up to the ceiling height. So new curtains. It's going to be great.
I love it. Please send a picture and I will post it as part of my little
I
note.
will. I'll take a before and after.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I so appreciate your time and energy and openness and being willing to talk so frankly about your inner world and all the things that have been happening for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Micah. I was so looking forward to this. I remember meeting you really early on in my apprenticeship when you came in to get tattooed, and I've been listening to the podcast since then. And this has just been really nice. You have such a beautiful perspective on the world and the work. And yeah, I was really honored that you asked me to be on. So thank you.
You are so sweet.